Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices. In today's Horror Fast 5, it's going to stick, I know it. We're going to be talking about 5 horror tropes that I'm kind of tired of seeing. Majority of these are going to be movies, but for one particular subject, I am going to talk a lot about video games. The nerve. So I actually read quite a few articles, or have read quite a few articles about horror tropes that people are tired of seeing. And it all includes stuff like creepy kids, which I'm not tired of seeing that. That shit's effective. Stuff like, I'm trying to remember what it's not like. One of them had like 44 things. And like if a horror movie like didn't do any of those 44 things, it would be like a rom-com. Like it's just a crazy list. So like basements and attics, they're effective. Like it was that kind of stuff. Girls falling, which we're all sick of that shit, right? But that's not on my list. Well, it is and it isn't. So my first trope is going to be, and this is a big one for me. This one really bugs me. And it happens a lot of times. It's what I call the unreliable witness. When I try to give an example of this, like when I'm telling people about it, or I'm like, you know what I hate about horror movies? Like the one thing that really drives me crazy. And they have like no idea what I'm talking about, which that happens to me a lot. And so I'm always like, okay, so like, here's my example. Okay. So in Evil Dead, in the original The Evil Dead, okay, the person that experiences the tree and the bad stuff in the woods, right, is a normal, sane human being that there is literally no reason to not believe what she said, okay? So my comparison for that is then when you look at the remake, not remake, there is, Mia is a drug addict that is detoxing and going through withdrawals and ready to like give up and give back in. And she's the person that this happens to, the first things that happen to. She's the one that experiences the tree. She's the one that gets taken over first. Like it's like this whole thing, but she's not a reliable, she is not a reliable witness because she would say anything to get out of the situation that she's in. So of course you don't believe her and you stay in the spooky ass cabin, right? But it drives me crazy because it happens like all the time. It's a constant theme. And so I think there are a few good examples of times like that. Like there's some horror movies where you really just don't really buy it at first. Like sometimes in horror movies, kids, for example, are the ones that are experiencing the crazy stuff. And they either don't say anything because they know they're not going to be believed, or they do say something and the parents are like, no, this happens in like a lot of movies. The Conjuring, it happens in, even in The Exorcist, like I just think there's plenty of examples throughout the history of horror where children are not believed. And it kind of sort of makes sense because kids get scared of the dark. They have wild imaginations. They let their thinking kind of get the best of them. They're still kind of coming into an understanding of how the world works. So a lot of things are a lot more scary and seem a lot more real than they might actually be. Even though I'm gonna tell you, if my kid says some shit, we're moving. Like it's really that simple. But like, so kids are one of those that I'm like, okay, I give it like a pass. But sometimes there's a lot of other examples where it just doesn't make any sense that this person comes to you and they're like, I just got thrown across the room, and you're like, go take a nap, you're crazy. Like if I'm a relatively sane person and I go to my best friend and I say, hey, I saw some shit or this happened to me, if she doesn't believe me, I'm getting a new best friend, because that's ridiculous. Like, and it just kind of pulls me out of it because it's like it would have been so simple, so easy to make the reliable witness an unreliable witness, and just makes it, because it's like, how many times in a movie can you say, well, that's just how the movie goes to make it a movie? It's like, no, make it more real. And another part of that really kind of drives me crazy is a lot of times the unreliable witness tends to be women. Which is like not good. That happens a lot. You know, and there's even examples of it happening in peer groups, right? So like when Lori starts telling her friends, oh, I see this crazy ass guy in a mask, they don't believe her right away. It takes them a little bit to realize, and then they die. And that's what they get for not believing their friend. There's a moral to that story. And then there's also this weird thing about elders, not listening to elders, because elders are essentially, in certain movie types, I guess we'll say, elders are reliable witnesses. They've seen things, they've experienced things. Like if they're warning you to not bury anything in a cemetery because it might come back to life and try to eat your face off, maybe don't do that. Like, I'm just saying, it's pretty simple. So the unreliable witness is one of the tropes that really drives me crazy, because I feel like it's so simple to make someone not trustworthy. You know, if it's like a skis ball of like a character, or like they did a drug addiction one. Like, I mean, I just feel like there's ways to work around that. But if somebody normal that you've known for a long ass time comes to you and tells you that something picked them up by their throat, you are a horrible human being if you don't believe them. Like, I'm just saying. Which is going to lead me into two, which is female purity. I talked about this in last week's video a little bit, about this concept of the final girl, and like I listened to What a Scream podcast, and she really got her podcast, that one particular episode really got me thinking about this concept of the final girl. And ironically, the final girl trope is actually on a lot of lists of things that people can't stand about horror tropes. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I can't tell if it's like you don't like it because it's always poorly done, or you don't like it because it's like an empowerment thing. Like, I don't know. But for me, the biggest thing is when there's this concept of female purity, is then like, you know, the virgins live and the girls who have sex and drink with their boyfriends die, you know, like, or there's this other concept where like if someone is like a heroine, they can't have sex appeal. Like they have to be like, for example, and this is an older one, and I realize like this is kind of moving towards a very different genre. Final Girls, a lot of different like things are happening and changing in film, and it's not like it was before. But when you think about the character of Ripley from Alien, she's super, super, super androgynous, and I refuse to believe that that's not intentional. She's an amazing character. We love her. She's one of our favorites. I definitely consider her a final girl, but like, they've made this big effort to just make her so plain when the actress that played her was anything but. So those kind of things are super annoying. And then it's also kind of falls into the female stuff with like the falling all the time. Like, I'm sure there's examples of men falling. I'm not arguing that at all, but it is really annoying because as soon as you see, like, I don't know anybody that is going to watch a horror movie, see a girl running, and not immediately think, oh, that bitch is going to fall down, they're going to catch her. Like that, because that's what happens in like every horror movie. So that's my number two. My number three is one that I am very glad to see changing drastically over the last decade, more specifically probably in the last like 5 years or so. And that's, of course, any person of color not surviving a horror movie. And I mean, honestly, I could list all the movies. It's a long ass list. And it's funny because D-Ray is a comedian. I don't know if you know who that is or not, but he's on Netflix. He's hysterical. But he makes a joke about himself in the sense that he was in The Fog, the movie The Fog. And I think it's The Fog. It's either The Fog or The Mist. They're really close. It's one of the two. Anyway, but he jokes that like not only was he a black guy in a horror movie, but he was a black guy in a horror movie and he survived, because it's not common. Like everyone, there's like that token person, and it becomes obnoxious, and it's so good to see. And now you've got movies like that really make stands. The first one that always comes to mind, of course, is Get Out. And Jordan Peele in general is a bit of like, so from what I've seen so far of his movies and things that he's done, he is definitely a really great person to put on projects when you're trying to make a statement, because Get Out was unnerving in all the ways it needed to be, and then some. And I'm still, I mean, I saw it when it first came out. When I watch it, like if I even talking about it with people and just picking up and like learning about all these things that I missed. Like I remember I was discussing this movie with a coworker, and he and I were talking about what that meant for him as a person of color, like watching that movie. And so we were talking about it, going back and forth, and he was like talking about the part, there's a part in the movie, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, the girl takes her two colored cereals and she takes them apart, and I was like, holy cow, like I didn't even think about, like, I don't know, it's just interesting how much symbolism is in that movie and all the things that are there. And it's just interesting, and it makes it really good. But I'm glad that one is sort of fading, but I think it still kind of is there. Like a lot of times, like I guess you can't really use Cabin in the Woods as an example of anything anyway, because Cabin in the Woods is sort of meant to be that. It's a horror trope movie. That's like literally what it's about. It kind of like pokes fun at the concept of all of these, like, no, you gotta show the sex scenes because like that's what people want to see, so you gotta show it. Like it's a really good movie. But anyway, so that's another one that kind of gets under my skin. I feel like we should be way past that kind of stuff. And then when you think about, like, there are people, believe it or not, that will argue that Romero's Night of the Living Dead was not any sort of statement on society. That would be like so many accidents. Like in order to make all of the things in that movie that stick out, that do seem to make a statement, for that to be an accident would be kind of crazy. But it's so interesting when you think about this concept that not only was, the black character in that film was the lead role, and not only that, but he was the one kind of running, he was like literally running the show. He was the character. And there's that whole scene where he beats up the other guy, and and then at the very end, even after all that shit that he's been through as the head honcho of our storyline, our hero, our main character, everything, we've been through so much with him, and then he gets shot at the end anyway. And you can take that however you want to take it, but that says a lot to me as far as a statement piece. So I'm glad to see that we're kind of getting away from that, but I would really like it to not be a thing anymore. Like maybe one day when we're talking about horror movies, we won't be talking about how there's always the token person of color that dies. I'm really hoping that's not the situation. And my fourth one is sort of similar to the concept of a reliable witness, but a little bit different. And it's what I'm going to call the non-believer. So the non-believer is someone that either A, isn't taking the situation seriously enough, aka reading out of a book you have no business reading out of. In that movie that I watched not that long ago for the first time, that was really good, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It was a guy trying to summon the dead, but he had like no respect for anything that was going on. He didn't respect the people he brought to that island. He didn't respect the bodies and the graves that he bothered and dug up. Like he didn't respect anything that was going on. And then the other side of the non-believer is the person that thinks you're full of shit. And I think that's like I think when I think of that, one of the first things I think of is Patrick Wilson's character in Insidious. So even though as a child he was a dream walker, or whatever she calls him, traveler. She calls him a traveler. Was a traveler when he was a child. He has no memory of it. So his wife seeing these things in the house and experiencing all these things, he's like, oh, you're just stressed, have some wine. Like he just completely dismisses it because he doesn't believe in any of that stuff. And then it takes so long in the storyline to get to a point where they believe. And then by then it's like all this shit has happened when you could have just given somebody the benefit of the doubt and believed them, which does kind of tie into the reliable witness. But it seems like that's really common too, where there's always one or two people that just don't believe in whatever it is that's going on, and they don't respect the situation, they don't care, and they're reckless or careless, and then it ends up causing other people all this pain and misery and stuff. And that's one that kind of gets under my skin, just like a little bit. And then my last one is going to be, this one is kind of more about video games, but there's a couple of examples of this with movies as well. And that's this trope of mental illness. So you have some films that I think at least in my humble opinion, do a really good job of kind of addressing mental illness as far as like the way society looks at it, the lack of care that people get when they have mental illnesses, how they're regarded in the community, like that kind of stuff, like really focuses on the social issues surrounding mental illness, which, in case you didn't know, there's a lot. And then you have these other ones, these tropey ones, where, it's, you're going through all of these things, but none of it's real, and you end up finding out that you're crazy. Like, it's such a simple out for a story. You don't have to really think about the ending, because your version of a shock factor ending is, it was me. I killed my daughter. Oh my God, it was me. I did this, like that kind of thing. And it happens so much in horror video games. So much. And it's so annoying, because most of the time you can tell when it's going to come, and you're just like, it's me, right? I'm the killer. Yeah, okay, cool. And you're like it's such an overdone thing. And it doesn't take an opportunity to like, I guess, not express, what's the word I'm looking for? To examine mental illness and what it means. There are a few like horror movies that I think are pretty good. I really liked The Visit, which is a really good movie, found footage-y movie. I think The Shining is a really great example of this slow descent into a mental illness. And it's funny because, like, The Shining is such a staple. Like, so many people love that movie. People know it by name. They know lines even if they've never seen it, which is always hysterical to me. And it to me, one of the reasons I've talked about this before, one of the reasons that I like it so much is because it does such a great job of creating this atmosphere where you really just aren't really sure. And I don't suffer from mental illness myself. I know people that have. There are people very close to me in my family that have. And I think it just did a much better job of at least trying to explain what that might feel like. And normally you don't really get that. It's normally about making, and this is really what it boils down to, it's normally about making the person with mental illness the bad guy. They killed a bunch of people, they blew up a house, there's always this trope that mental illness equals the bad guy. And that's nauseating. Like, it sucks so bad that that's such a common thing. And I like some things, I think they ended up building an entire story around Lights Out that ended up having to do with the mother's mental illness. And then what they did for Diana, which is the character, the monster, spirit, lady thing, they made hers so that she didn't have like an actual mental illness, but she had like a physical ailment that eventually affected her mentality, blah, blah, blah. And the mom was like her only friend. And so that one's done a little bit better than some. But I think, as people love this movie, and I am absolutely convinced that the only reason people love this movie is because Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis. I always say her name really fast so you can't tell if I'm saying it right or not. Follow me for more ways to avoid being accurate when you say people's names. It's because there's a kissing scene. Like, everyone's like, oh my God, this movie was such a mindfuck, and this movie blew my mind. And I'm like, did it? Or did you have to have some alone time afterwards? Like, it was not a good movie. It did not, in my opinion, it did not give you any, insight into what was going on. But it's absolutely a movie about a mental breakdown. Like, absolutely, that's what it's about. This concept of success and obsession just eating you away to the point that you do things, once again, becoming the bad guy, that you wouldn't have done in a different frame of mind. If you had been able to get help, if you had been able to have support, or, kind of navigate these things a little more successfully. And that sucks because people love that movie, and I don't understand why. These next two are other movies that people love, and I don't know why. And I won't go on about these next two because I've already done that enough in other episodes. Hereditary And Donnie Darko is another one. And I don't know. I feel like it's a trope that needs to be reevaluated as being used. It's a trope in horror games. It's a trope in horror movies and TV shows and all kinds of things. And it sucks because it doesn't promote understanding or awareness or acceptance or compassion of any kind, because you're always making them the bad guy. And I hate that. That drives me crazy. I guess I rambled enough. Yeah, so those are my 5 tropes that I don't really care for in the horror genre. It's weird because when I was reading some, I think the only other one that I saw that I wholeheartedly agreed on was like some little nitpicky things, like the car not starting, or people running away from the killer but they go upstairs instead of out the front door. And it's funny because, you know, movies like Scream 2 have addressed these things. They talk about them openly in the movie where it happens, which is funny. But yeah, so those are my main ones. Those are ones that when I see them, I get frustrated and I'm just like, ugh. Especially if it's like a movie or something that has so much potential and it's just ruined. So anyway, that's my my bitch fest about tropes and horror movies. Feel very passionately about some of these, a little more passionately than I might have realized. Anyway, yeah, so that's my 5 tropes. What do you think of those 5? Do you have different ones? I feel like there were so many on these lists that I just thought like they didn't like creepy kids. I said that. They didn't like that the cars don't start. They didn't like attics or basements. They didn't like oh, this was another one that I think I saw on like a million lists, was not having phone service. And I'm like, well, depending on when the movie came out, that may not actually be that far-fetched given the situation, you know, because phones didn't work that great in the beginning. It took a really long time, and sometimes they still don't work. I live in a very populated area, and there's there's stuff everywhere out here, and if I turn my Wi-Fi off, my phone does not work in this house. Like, it's so, you know, but that's just interesting to read the things that people notice and like really gets under their skin, because you know that when you notice something like that, if you have such a strong opinion about it, as you're watching it, it slowly just ruins the movie just a little bit more the longer that you watch it. So that's, yeah. So anyway, so that's my 5 horror tropes. I'm done for real this time. I hope you guys are having a really good week. Enjoy your weekend when you get there, and I'll see you in the next one.